and more, January through April. Learn more at rclassociation.org.
Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office has been rocked by an academic cheating scandal. 6 top-level deputies lost their jobs, and Sheriff Chad Chronister is promising a change in culture.
They paid with their careers. Their careers in law enforcement are over.
Has the sheriff done enough to restore your trust in his office? I'm Matthew Petty, and coming up on Florida Matters Live and Local, we'll talk about it. And confusion over SNAP benefits. They've been stopped, but judges have ordered the federal government to keep funding SNAP. If you rely on SNAP to help feed yourself and your family, what are you doing to survive? Are you looking for a way to help others less fortunate? Call 813-755-6562 and let's talk about these issues and more. That's 813-755-6562. You'd also meet best-selling novelist Fiona Hill ahead of her local visit. First, these headlines.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Food aid for millions of Americans is in jeopardy after the Trump administration stopped making SNAP payments over the weekend. NPR's Joe Hernandez reports it is unclear when the payments will resume, but 2 federal judges have ordered the government to tap into emergency funds.
In one of those cases in Rhode Island, a federal judge directed the Trump administration to make full SNAP payments by Monday or partial payments by Wednesday. Administration officials had previously argued that they could not use emergency funds they said were reserved for natural disasters to pay for regular benefits. Government lawyers are expected to update the judges in both cases today. Nearly 42 million Americans rely on SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. A number of states have put up their own money to try to help those losing their benefits this week, and some food banks across the country are seeing a spike in demand. Joe Hernandez, NPR News.
The government shutdown entered its second month on Saturday. A global hunger research group is confirming famine conditions in Darfur, Sudan for the second time in just over a year. Internal fighting's intensified and life-saving supplies are being blocked from reaching tens of thousands of people. The Integrated Food Security Phase classification says famine conditions are marked by collapse in livelihood, starvation, extremely high malnutrition, and death. Virginia is a day away from electing a governor. Early voting ended Saturday, but campaigning continued through the weekend. VPM News' Jad Khalil reports.
Former Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger is the Democrats' nominee, and Lieutenant Governor Winsome Earl-Sears is the Republicans. In Norfolk on Saturday, former President Barack Obama campaigned for Spanberger. He spoke about health care challenges and the replacement of the East Wing with a ballroom.
So, Virginia, here's the good news. If you can't visit a doctor, don't worry. He will save you a dance.
Virginia's gubernatorial race gets attention nationwide as a test of the federal government's policies. It's something current Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin noted as he stumped for Earl-Sears on Sunday.
The eyes of the nation are on us once again saying what's happening in Virginia.
Over 1 million Virginians have voted early. For NPR News, I'm Jad Khalil in Hanover, Virginia.
Tylenol and Kleenex could soon be in the same corporate shopping basket. NPR's Scott Horsley reports on a proposed merger that would combine 2 big consumer products companies.
Kleenex maker Kimberly-Clark is offering to buy Tylenol's parent company in a deal valued at nearly $49 billion. Tylenol maker Kenvue also sells Band-Aids, and the company could use one. Its stock has suffered in recent weeks after unfounded claims from President Trump and his health secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., about the pain reliever's safety. Kenvue was spun off from the giant health conglomerate Johnson & Johnson 2 years ago. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
This is NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive, with small business insurance for protecting a variety of business types with multiple coverage options, designed to fit business owners' needs. More about small business insurance is at progressivecommercial.com.
You're listening to WUSF 89.7. I'm Craig Kopp. Tampa residents expressed frustration with the high cost of electricity during a symbolic bill-burning event in West Tampa on Saturday. Brooke Ward with Food and Water Watch says another rate increase will likely be finalized tomorrow, which means
Tampa Electric customers will be paying $939 more a year for electricity than they were just 5 years ago. This has got to stop.
Tampa City Council member Lynn Hurtak says the Sunshine State should rely more on solar energy.
We're asking for a partnership with TECO to do just that. Look at more solar. Stop the reliance on natural gas and focus on the clean energy that we have so much of in this phenomenal state.
If you're having a hard time paying your electric bill, check your options at tampaelectric.com/payassist. You're paying a little bit more for gas than you did last week. Prices settled back down after a pretty sharp increase early in the week. AAA says the average price of a gallon of regular unleaded is $2.96. That's an increase of 5 cents from a week ago, but still 12 cents less than this time last month. AAA says that up and down trend is likely to continue, although last week's increase is on the low end of what you might see. Motorists across the greater Tampa Bay region are paying slightly more at $2.98 on average. The University of South Florida men's and women's basketball regular seasons tip off tonight in a doubleheader at Yuengling Center in Tampa. The women will play Florida International University at 6 p.m. The men's game against Florida A&M will follow at around 8. While interim women's head coach Michelle Woods-Baxter succeeds Jose Fernandez. He took a job with the WNBA. I'm Craig Kopp, WUSF 89.7 News.
WUSF depends on contributions from people like you. And Seitenbacher, with a new web shop. Healthy muesli, cold-pressed oils, and vegetable broth mix delivered to your door from right here in Tampa Bay. Details at Seitenbacher.com. Seitenbacher. Seitenbacher.
Want to catch up on Tampa Bay area news and culture? I'm Sky LeBron, and I got you every weekday morning with the Bay Blend podcast from WUSF. It's quick, fun, and you'll discover something new every day. It's the Bay Blend, wherever you get your podcasts or at WUSF.org.
This is Florida Matters Live and Local. I'm Matthew Petty. We're broadcasting live from the Drs. Lorraine Rubis and Neil Frankel studio at our studios in Tampa. A lapse of judgment. That's how Hillsborough County Sheriff Chad Chronister described the cheating scandal, which led to his chief deputy, 3 captains, and 3 colonels being fired or resigning. That's the entire command staff. Investigators found they'd relied on someone else to write academic papers for them.
What occurred here was not about a lack of ability or care. It was a shortcut, a moment of poor judgment, a choice that, while wrong, was not malicious.
Now, one of those deputies who was let go was seen as a potential successor to Sheriff Chronister.
I think the biggest way we move forward is what I do each and every day, and that's fix and repair policy and establish culture. You would have to live under a rock right now to see that I have a zero tolerance when it comes to integrity and violations of integrity.
Well, to explain the details of the scandal, how it was uncovered, here's Dan Sullivan with the Tampa Bay Times. Dan, thank you so much for coming by. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And your questions and comments are welcome. What does the sheriff have to do to restore your trust in the office? Was the internal investigation that took place enough? Call and let's talk. We're at 813-755-6562. That's 813-755-6562, or you can send us an email, FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. Okay, so Dan, academic cheating sounds kind of innocuous for a sheriff's department. What exactly was going on? What are these deputies accused of?
Well, basically, it started over the summer with Anthony Collins, who was the one of the chief deputies of the sheriff's office. And
this is the guy who's kind of like next in line in succession, so to speak.
Yeah, he was. He's about. He's below the undersheriff, so he was kind of like third from the top. But he was. A lot of people saw him as a potential successor to Sheriff Chronister, and basically to put it in a nutshell, he was found to be communicating with a guy named Robert Rausch, who allegedly wrote academic papers for him while he was attending the FBI National Academy. And over the course of several more weeks, they found out that there were other people in the sheriff's command staff who had also communicated with this gentleman, and it appeared had enlisted his help in writing academic papers for different professional schools that they were attending.
Okay, so why is this important? I mean, what would these academic papers be helping these deputies with?
Well, it was a lot of different things. Like with Anthony Collins, the FBI National Academy is a very prestigious program for law enforcement leaders, and it was a lot of classes to do with law and enforcing the law and, just things like that, kind of similar to a lot of college courses. And, it speaks to personal integrity, when you're going into these classes. There's, it's understood that, you're supposed to be doing your own work. And, I think the sheriff has even said, it's especially important for law enforcement officers to be honest about this sort of thing, because if they're, dishonest, then, what else can we trust them with?
Right. So it seems like there's two things going on here. On the one hand, the sheriff is saying, okay, this is important. This is why they've been let go, or they've been sort of told to resign. Like there were two who resigned, the others were fired. They sort of thought they could kind of fight the system or go through it and sort of end up on the right side of things, but that's not what happened. But at the same time, he's saying these are good people, essentially. What they did was wrong, but it wasn't malicious. So what's happening there?
Well, I think he was pointing to the fact that a lot of these people have had long careers in law enforcement. A lot of them, they have a lot of experience as leaders and, as people who respond to dire emergencies. But, at the same time, like I said, it speaks to an issue of integrity. And if they're, willing to be dishonest about their academics, what else are they willing to be dishonest about? And can we trust them to testify in court and that sort of thing?
Mm-hmm. If you're just joining us, we're talking with Tampa Bay Times reporter Dan Sullivan. He's been covering the academic cheating scandal that led to 6 Hillsborough County Sheriff's deputies losing their jobs. Do you think these officers should have been fired, and is that punishment too much? Call 813-755-6562 if you want to weigh in. That's 813-755-6562. You can also send us an email, FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. Well, Chronister was asked why an outside agency didn't do the investigation. Let's just take a listen.
You keep bringing that up. What would I call an outside agency and have them do, though? What would they have access to that we don't have access to? What would be different? That's why I'm trying to tell you, we have the best investigators in the business. You see the thorough packet that you have. There's nothing from an outside agency that would have come in and done that we didn't do.
Okay, so the sheriff kind of clearly pushing back a little bit there, and he referred to the scandal as a moment of poor judgment, but this was 6 people. It was over the course of months. I mean, it doesn't sound like a moment, does it?
Yeah, I think it was actually over the course of years, and I think he even mentioned that it was, it speaks to the culture within the agency. If people saw this as something that was acceptable, it speaks to a cultural problem. And
he's talked about saying he wants to reset that culture effectively.
Yeah, and I think he mentioned that he has, revised certain policies to make it clear that this is unacceptable. And as far as, whether an outside agency should look at it, he said that the evidence they uncovered didn't point to anything criminal, and so there wasn't really anything more that they could do. But I think, there is sort of a lingering question about, was anybody else involved in this, and did anybody else do this and just kind of not get caught? And I think that's sort of where some of those questions are coming from about whether another outside agency should, do things to look into it more.
Is an internal investigation credible in this situation?
Well, it certainly appears, based on the amount of material that they released, that they did do a pretty thorough investigation. I think kind of one of the problems is, they're going based on the records that they were able to find, emails that people had in their work computers where they were, communicating with this guy. And because it's not a criminal investigation, they can't do things like look at, people's personal emails or conduct search warrants for stuff. And so it's a little bit limited in that respect.
Dan, the Times broke the story. How did you come across the information?
We started looking into this this past summer when Anthony Collins suddenly resigned. And, like we said, he was seen as kind of a rising star within the agency, a possible successor to the sheriff, and he had just been appointed to be the chief deputy a few months before he resigned, and so it was kind of perplexing, why he suddenly quit. And through our reporting, we were able to find that it happened after his wife had actually brought to the sheriff's attention and to a lot of other people's attention this academic cheating thing. And the sheriff said that when he talked with Collins, he admitted that this gentleman, Robert Rausch, had done about 50% of his work at the FBI National Academy. And
he was referred to, I think, in some of the documents that came to light as the English goat, right?
Yeah,
greatest of all time.
That was one of the people who allegedly used him to write papers, described him that way. They said he was the English goat.
Mm-hmm. I mean, what impact does this have on the sheriff's chain of command? It does seem like a lot of top officers have suddenly been let go.
Yeah, I think it's not his entire command staff. It's about 13% of his command staff, but it's still a significant chunk of the leadership within the sheriff's office. And I think the sheriff has had to a certain extent, reorganize his command staff and promote people to replace the ones who have gone. And, there's a lot of big shoes to fill, so to speak.
So Chad Cronus was easily reelected in 2024. Is this going to tarnish his image? Like, are you expecting some challenges to come out of the woodwork on the back of this?
I don't know. I think that sort of remains to be seen. I think there is a lot of talk about this in the local law enforcement community. I don't know if it will become something that is a big enough issue that it will result in some kind of a political challenge to the sheriff. He has said that he aims to run for re-election in 2028, so I guess we'll see what happens.
And aside from what the sheriff has laid out and what he discussed in that press conference last week, I mean, have there been calls for some kind of independent oversight panel to look further into things?
There have been some calls, to have, I guess, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement take a look at it. I don't know if there would be another agency that would want or could step in. There have been a lot of people that have kind of questioned Chronister's leadership because of this, but he says he's done what he can to address the issue.
What are you going to be watching for next at the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office?
I think it'll be interesting to see if there's anything that comes out, comes to light as far as, whether there was anybody else that was engaging in this sort of academic dishonesty and, if there's any more fallout, if there's any more political fallout for the sheriff. I mean, this is, he has said himself that this is a scandal, and I think he's moving pretty aggressively to try to address it.
We've been speaking with Tampa Bay Times reporter Dan Sullivan. Thanks for your reporting and thanks for sharing some of your insights with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, coming up, food assistance benefits for millions of Americans are in a political purgatory, including 3 million Floridians. No one has received their SNAP benefits that should have arrived this weekend after 2 courts ordered that the federal government pay for the benefits during the shutdown. Some families are choosing between groceries and paying other bills. If you're on SNAP or your loved ones anxious about putting food on the table, are you looking for ways to help? We'll talk about it in about coming up next, and you can join the conversation at 813-755-6562. That's 813-755-6562. Or you can send us an email, FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. Florida Matters Live and Local continues in just a moment. Stay with us.
Grammy Award-winning guitarist Pat Metheny comes to the Billheimer Capitol Theater. Experience an unforgettable night of jazz with elements of progressive and contemporary, Latin and fusion. March 16th. Visit rutheckerdhall.com.
I'm Peter O'Dowd. Political winds have shifted. Federal support for renewable energy projects and solar tax credits have taken a beating.
The good news is solar is still one of the cheapest forms of energy on the planet. There's interesting headwinds and tailwinds that are coming at us all at once.
That's next time on Here and Now.
Join us this afternoon from 1 to 3 on WUSF 89.7.
This is Layla Faldin with NPR. A donation to this station can take many forms, including that vehicle you no longer need. If you don't need it, donate it. Help us bring you news you count on. Thanks.
Welcome back to Florida Matters, live and local. I'm Matthew Petty, talking about the millions of Americans who rely on SNAP benefits to help put food on the table, including 3 million people roughly in Florida, many of whom are elderly, disabled, kids, or otherwise in need. Funding for SNAP didn't get sent out Saturday as planned. It's a victim of the federal government shutdown. Federal judges have ordered the government to use emergency money to cover the payments, but there are a lot of questions about whether the Trump administration will follow the ruling of 2 judges, and if so, how that funding will happen and how long it'll take to get those benefits restarted. Now, if you rely on SNAP benefits, what worries you? Or maybe you have loved ones who need help. Share your experiences and questions. The number is 813-755-6562. That's 813-755-6562. You can also send us an email, FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. Well, Tasha Cohen-Glynn is a community outreach liaison for a local credit union. She told WUSF there are lots of ways people can get help, including food banks and food pantries.
And I want people to know that local help is available, it's accessible, without judgment. A lot of times people feel, and I think they let their pride get in the way in receiving assistance that we need. But this is exactly what we're here for.
And you can find a list of those and other resources at WUSF.org. With us is WUSF reporter Gabriella Paul. She covers people who live paycheck to paycheck. Gabby, thank you so much for stopping by.
Yes, thanks for having me.
And Kelly Casto is with us as well, owner of Your Neighborhood Produce. It's a fresh produce store in St. Petersburg. Kelly, thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on.
Want to hear from you as well. If you rely on SNAP benefits to help feed yourself and your loved ones, how are you getting by? What are you worried about at this moment in time? Maybe you're looking for a way to help. You're looking for a way to help those less fortunate, and you would like to know what you can do. You can give us a call, 813-755-6562. That's 813-755-6562. Gabriella, I mean, just for people who maybe haven't been following this super closely, what exactly is SNAP and how much do you get if you are on SNAP? What do those benefits pay for?
Yeah, to get you up to speed here, SNAP, it stands for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. It's also known as food stamps. It's the nation's largest anti-hunger program. It actually dates back to the Great Depression. And essentially, based on income and a lot of other household factors, you can qualify for this federal food assistance that comes in the form of money usually to your EBT app that goes every month. And now states have the job of administering it. But as of now, the federal government pays for those benefits. Mm-hmm.
It's kind of confusing, right? I mean, SNAP benefits were set to run out of money on Saturday. A couple of judges ordered the government to issue payments. What's the latest on that?
Yes. If you're confused, that's okay. If you're a SNAP beneficiary who's confused, that makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of different funding pots here that have overlapped, and there's a lot of politics going on. So essentially, the regular funding for SNAP, it expired when lawmakers failed to fund the government October 1st. That's the definition of a government shutdown that we're obviously still in. And now, when the government does fund a program, a social program like SNAP, it also sets aside money that's known as contingency funds. In the news, you may have heard a lot about emergency funding for SNAP. This is what that is. So last year, the government put $122 billion towards SNAP. That's just the regular funding to keep it going. And it put $3 billion in this reserve to be tapped into for a moment just like this when the government shut down and people still need benefits, but there's no more regular funding, right, until the lawmakers decide to fund for the next year. So there's that $3 billion contingency fund. There's also about $2 or $3 extra billion in this pot just from past contingency, set aside. So about $5 billion that can be tapped into right now.
Okay, just for some context, I mean, the amount of money that SNAP requires every year is what, $120 billion roughly?
Roughly, that's the number that federal lawmakers have put forth. Mm-hmm. In Florida, we know that it takes $6 billion to pay for SNAP for the whole year.
Yeah, so I mean, in context, $5 billion out of 120, that's not much. It's not going to keep it going for very long.
Right, and that's not the mechanism it's designed to do, right? It's not meant to be that total appropriations amount. It's supposed to be something to get through a couple weeks of a shutdown, but as we're seeing, shutdowns are lasting a little bit longer. This is on track to be a historically long shutdown, and so, yeah, it's a drop in the bucket, and it's not even going to completely fund the next month of benefits. So there's a lot of conversation happening with the Trump administration about what else can be dipped into to, bolster that $5 billion amount.
If you're just joining us on Florida Matters Live and Local, we're talking about the millions of Americans who rely on SNAP benefits to help put food on the table. There's about 3 million people here in Florida. Many of them are elderly or otherwise in need. If you rely on SNAP benefits to get by, I want to hear from you. If you've got loved ones who need SNAP benefits to put food on the table, let us know what's going on there. 813-755-6562. Maybe you're somebody who is in the fortunate position of being able to help and you're wondering, what can I do? We'd love to hear from you as well. 813-755-6562. Well, Kelly, I want to bring you into this conversation. I mean, how does the fight over funding SNAP benefits impact how you run your produce store?
So my produce store is about 30 to 50% lower than all major chains. So
in terms of pricing?
In terms of pricing.
Okay.
So I created this because we lost our own funding. And I always say, if SNAP went away, how would you sustain your family? Mm-hmm. I think right now in this crisis, we need to take a minute and pause and think about our own life and figure out, are there some things I can go without? Can I shop at a local produce store where it's cheaper? A family of 3 can come shop at our store and get 8 meals for less than $29.
Okay. Let's go to the phones now. We've got Betsy calling in, I believe, from Pinellas County. Betsy, you're on the air. What's on your mind?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Sure can. Go for it.
I'm trying to listen to the radio and my phone at the same time. Okay. Yeah, so I work at the 15th Street Farm, which we're an educational urban farm in St. Pete, downtown St. Pete. And we have set up this season a disaster resource hub. We actually originally set it up for hurricane response, but now we have kind of switched, and now we are working with our neighborhood association, which is the newly formed Methodist Town Neighborhood Association. And we're working with several of our neighbors, and we're going to be assessing the needs of the neighborhood this week, and then we're hopefully going to then be connecting people with the many resources. We have been networking with Pinellas County with emergency management and lots of different partners in networking, and there's a lot of resources out there. So two of the donation side of it, if people want to help and donate, would be the St. Pete Free Clinic, and also the Feeding Tampa Bay.
Got it.
So if people want to, give donations, monetary donations, or if people want to help, with larger, if they're able to help with larger gift in kind. So that's one thing that's happening, and we're excited to, be able to help.
Betsy, thank you so much for calling in. Really appreciate that. Betsy weighing in from Pinellas County. We're about to go to a break, but real quick, I imagine there's some other opportunities in other counties as well, Gabriella, for folks to contribute if they need to.
Absolutely. I mean, Betsy kind of put the nail on the head there. But food banks in our region, they're bracing for this surge in demand. It's honestly not a new thing. It's been happening since the federal government shutdown, and furloughed workers have really constituted a big jump in demand. But we're also seeing big corporations are stepping up. I've seen alerts this week from DoorDash, from Instacart, offering free meals, free delivery, and a lot of small businesses are also making social media posts saying kids eat free until the shutdown ends. Also seeing just some social posts about adopting, a neighbor to go shopping and compiling resources online. So,
Lots to think about. Talking about SNAP benefits on Florida Matters Live and Local, and what to do when federal funding runs out. If you're affected, give us a call, 813-755-6562. That's 813-755-6562. The conversation continues on Florida Matters Live and Local in just a moment.
Support for WUSF comes from listeners like you and from Sessoms Law Group. Mark Sessoms has 36 years of legal experience. The practice focuses on civil trial, marital, and family law with offices in Tampa, Lakeland, Sarasota, and Sebring. Firm credentials can be viewed online at sessomslawgroup.com. The Orchid Show 2025, Rebecca Louise Law, is on view now at Selby Gardens and its Sarasota campus. This exhibition will immerse you in flowers and foliage. See it through December 7th, presented by Better Grow. Details at selby.org.
On the next Fresh Air, Richard Linklater, who made the films Slacker, Dazed and Confused, the Before trilogy, and Boyhood, talks about his 2 new films. Blue Moon is about lyricist Lorenz Hart. Nouvelle Vague is an homage to director Jean-Luc Godard and his French New Wave film Breathless. Join us.
Great conversation on Fresh Air tonight at 7 on WUSF.
Welcome back to Florida Matters, live and local. I'm Matthew Petty. We're talking about SNAP benefits and what to do when those run out. We're with WSF's Gabriella Paul and Kelly Casto. Kelly is the owner of Your Neighborhood Produce in St. Petersburg. You can join the conversation too if you rely on SNAP, or maybe you have friends and family who do. How are you getting by, and what can you do to help if you are in the position to help those less fortunate? The number is 813-755-6562. That's 813-755-6562. A little bit of news coming in just now. The Trump administration saying today that it will provide partial food stamp benefits for November by tapping into the program's contingency fund amid the ongoing government shutdown. A U.S. Department of Agriculture official said in a sworn statement that the agency will use $4.65 billion from the contingency fund to pay the November benefits from the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, which he said will be obligated to cover 50% of eligible households' current allotments. But recipients will not see the payments immediately. Court papers submitted Monday. The administration said it decided against pulling funds from other sources of money to provide SNAP benefits for November, and the program costs a total of roughly $9 billion for the month, the agency has said. So, Gabriella, we were talking about the money just a moment ago. $4.65 billion, that's roughly half of what it's going to take to keep that going for November. So still some pretty big gaps to bridge there.
Yeah, so if I'm understanding correctly, if that was the response that the Trump administration had to have to the court by noon today, then they're saying that they're opting for, we're going to partially pay for these benefits by, I think their deadline for that was Wednesday. So that means that they're going to put some money up. Essentially, the USDA is dipping into those contingency funds, which I mentioned are that $3 billion that's set aside every year. So it won't last forever, but, and every state has its own deposit schedule. So some folks may be stretching dollars, from last month and have been waiting to see what will hit this time. Florida, they deposit money or administer from the 1st to the 28th, and it depends on your case number, the 8th and 9th digit of your case number. So it literally can just depend on.
How does that work?
Oh, it's really confusing. Yeah, I don't want to show you the table.
Okay.
But, when your benefits are going to hit and how you were able to maybe budget or make those decisions with so much uncertainty. I mean, even with this response from the Trump administration, it's still not clear when or how, that money will get down to the beneficiary level. And with so much uncertainty too, the Department of Children and Families, which is the group that administers SNAP in Florida, they're dealing with a logistical nightmare, trying to figure out in this in between what this means for beneficiaries and how they can get ahead of this.
Kelly, let me bring it back to the kind of boots on the ground level, which is where you're at. Like, what are you hearing from people who come and shop at your neighborhood produce store? Are they worried about this? Are they kind of looking for other ways to make their food budget stretch a little bit further?
So actually at my store, I get very little SNAP individuals in the store. I still can't figure out why that is. We mainly just have fresh produce and dry goods and stuff like that. But yesterday I was out in the community doing the Lealman's Farmers Market, and we had about 20 or 10 individuals come through. We gave them a $20 voucher to get fresh vegetables, and they were kind of overwhelmed about how much food that they could get for that $20. So with that, now they can probably eat for the next 2 weeks because our produce is so fresh, it stays longer. And I really think we need more sustainability. We don't have sustainability, in food stamps and like food banks are great for an immediate need, but for long term, we need to look at how we can help families and individuals be able to stretch their dollars. And that's why shopping at your neighborhood produce store allows you to do that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, is it a conversation you've had with other people who've maybe sort of set up similar operations to what you do?
There's really not anybody out there
doing what
like
you're doing?
me.
Okay.
I believe that dignity and choice is important. I believe that it should be a basic right to fresh, non-donated produce. Even if you're going through a food bank, you don't deserve day-old stuff that should be in the compost. So there's not individuals like me out there.
Talking about the expiration of SNAP benefits, of course, we just heard there is some hope on the horizon there. They're going to be partially funded for the month of November. But if you're impacted by this, we'd love to hear your perspective. The number is 813-755-6562. That's 813-755-6562. We're talking with WUSF's Gabriella Paul and Kelly Casto, who's the owner of Your Neighborhood Produce in St. Petersburg. So, Gabriella, are you hearing from food banks and other support groups that they're kind of worried about what's been happening over the last month and sort of how this is going to unfold?
Definitely hearing that from food banks. They are, ramping up efforts for mass distribution of food. There's some mobile food banks and efforts going on too. And kind of going back to Kelly's point, food banks are an amazing resource, but they're designed to be a stopgap measure used in conjunction often with federal programs. So talking about food assistance, it's really meant to, if you're on SNAP, maybe it helps you get that one or two extra things. Essentially right now we're seeing food banks across the country try to fill a hole that great as a job as they're doing, it's not possible to help feed. In Florida, 12% of the population that normally has around, per person in a household, about $180 a month to buy those groceries. So it's a huge gap in need, and food banks are trying their best. But a lot of food banks also receive federal funding or other grant funding that is being pulled in a lot of directions, because the truth is food assistance and cuts to SNAP also aren't happening in a vacuum. We're seeing a lot of other cuts in other areas that are coming back to people's household budgets and, making this issue that much harder to deal with.
I wanted to ask, too, about work waivers, because this is another thing you've been reporting on. These are like SNAP benefits for certain people. They were set to expire on Saturday, too, but you've kind of dug into that and found out some other things, too. What's going on there?
Yeah, let's add to the confusion of November 1st. So basically in Florida, what's been happening in the backdrop of federal SNAP cuts is that in the big, beautiful bill, there was some changes to work requirements baked in there. And so in Florida, what that looked like was work waivers for folks that typically don't have to, they're not treated like able-bodied adults without dependents, which is essentially, when you have to work about 80 hours a month in order to get your benefits, there was certain carve-outs. So this was for more vulnerable groups like people who are pregnant, people who have a physical or mental disability that keeps them from working, homeless folks, veterans, former foster youth. All these groups were protected from having to meet those work requirements in order to get food stamps. Well, essentially, as of November 1st, in Florida, those work requirements are no longer. That doesn't mean that people lose their work waivers right away. It will be depending on when the department has to check their eligibility. But it does mean that in the meantime of this government shutdown, if you're in one of those groups, you will have to consider how you can start getting part-time work so that you can, whenever the department comes back to certify your eligibility, you're able to provide that or lose your benefits.
Yeah. I wanted to come back to something you were saying before, Kelly, about the right to good quality food, essentially, which is sort of seems like that's at the core of why you set up your produce shop. Do you think there's maybe some misconceptions about kind of how people can access that food and who deserves it?
Do you mean at at the food banks or at my store?
No, at your store.
Oh, yeah. So I think people aren't sure always what I do. So anybody in the community can shop there. And then if you shop at the store utilizing your own money, you support our greater mission. We run a nonprofit where we fed 96,000 seniors last year, only fresh, non-donated produce. And after I lost my funding and after the hurricanes, I started helping families and individuals. So And then also a really cool thing at our store, like if once the SNAP comes back in, or if you still have SNAP benefits on your card, you can still use them this month. You can double your dollars at the store. So a lot of seniors I normally work with only get like $22 on SNAP.
Mhm.
So at our store, they can double their dollars. But I just feel like, I know myself, I basically am making $5 an hour right now, and I work probably 110 hours. And the thing that is saving me from not getting sick is eating whole food and cold pressed juice and items like that. And I think no matter where you are financially, you deserve the same access that I have. So that's why I created this environment for everyone to feel just as important. I never know what people are paying with when they come in my store.
Mhm.
I want everybody to be treated the same.
And how long has the store been going?
We've been open for 6 months.
Okay. I mean, is there some kind of outreach you need to do to maybe reach some more folks who may be not aware of that there's this option there for them?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to do the best that I can, but I'm a one-woman show. So if people need volunteer hours for their SNAP benefits, come on over. We'll work with you.
Yeah. Gabrielle, I mean, what are you going to be watching for as this story unfolds? Because, it seems to me that as we are in the situation where the benefits are going to be sort of half funded, as we said before, there are still some pretty big gaps there. Is the state going to have to step up some, and do you have a sense of how that might happen?
So I am going to be watching how the state maybe steps in, or maybe more accurately how some other states will step up. Florida has historically not stepped up to fill the gap in terms of funding food assistance or administrative costs for food assistance. But looking back to 2018, 2019, that was the last time we had a government shutdown of this caliber. And, funding SNAP was not an issue because January 2019 benefits were already paid ahead for, so it didn't get quite to this point. But back then, that was also a Trump presidency year. States had said that, if we needed to stopgap fund this, we feel confident the federal government would reimburse us. Of course, earlier this month and last month, Trump has actually said that states would not be reimbursed if they step up to pay for SNAP. So for that reason, I think a lot of states are having to crunch the numbers and make decisions about whether or not they will do this. I know some states are giving food banks, up to $1 million a week until the shutdown ends. So there are some states.
Is that happening in Florida?
Not in Florida.
Right.
Don't quote me on this. I believe it's Massachusetts, which is also where one of these court orders came out of, as well as Rhode Island. But some states are stepping up. Food experts here in Florida have told me that that's probably not going to be the case here.
A lot of families rely on school lunches and breakfasts and kind of those meals throughout the school day, throughout the school year to help supplement their kind of weekly grocery budget. I mean, is that going to help make up the food shortfall? Fortunately, we're not in summertime, right? So school's in session.
Wow. Yeah, you. I think I said that exact thing in the newsroom last week was thank goodness it's not a summer month right now. But I think that the shutdown and the lack of SNAP benefits right now really is underscoring the importance of free and reduced meals, and more importantly, also community eligibility provisions. So that's where when enough students are in need of those free meals, they actually will offer the entire school population, student population will get those free meals. And so I think that is really helping a lot of families right now. And in fact, that program is actually a piggyback program to SNAP. So, you don't have to, a lot of these families don't have to fill out a separate application to get those free and reduced meals. If you are eligible for SNAP in your household, you often get those free meals at school. But, families are getting by with those school meals. They're also maybe going and getting donation-based things at food banks. But to really, I want to amplify what Kelly said about, the value of shopping, being able to choose what your family needs and not be beholden to what's maybe being donated. I think that her store, which I've actually gone with her and watched her customers come through and chatted with her, I think that there's a lot of empowerment that comes from being able to shop for your own shopping cart, and also being a naturally occurring affordable grocery store is really a rarity. And so I'm wondering if this might show people just, how much we rely on SNAP and how, grocery prices are so crazy that maybe there'll be more community farms, urban farms, and more mini markets, and just neighbors helping neighbors. And I mean, South St. Pete is also a food desert, so she's really doing a lot there.
And as we heard from that caller earlier on, I think Betsy was her name, there needs to be more sustainability in general in the kind of food ecosystem here in the Tampa Bay region. I want to thank you both very much. We've been speaking with WSF's Gabriella Paul and Kelly Casto. Kelly is the owner of Your Neighborhood Produce. It's a fresh produce store in St. Petersburg. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Well, coming up next, maybe you've wandered around a famous building and wondered, would this be a good setting for a novel? Coming up, you're going to meet best-selling author Fiona Davis. She sets her historical novels in famous New York landmarks. Her latest, The Stolen Queen, takes readers on a journey from the Met, Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, to Cairo and back again. That conversation is coming up next on Florida Matters Live and Local. Stay tuned.
Gulfside Healthcare Services provides expert, compassionate care for every step of your journey. The Dr. J. Weil Center for Hospice Care in Newport Richey is now serving patients. Learn more at gulfside.org. WUSF thanks Community Foundation Tampa Bay for a generous grant supporting our Edward R. Murrow Award for Overall Excellence in Large Market Radio. Your investment in public media helps us serve our community. Thank you for believing in WUSF.
I'm Tiziana Deering. The new 5-part series Human on PBS Nova explores the history of Homo sapiens. Host Ella Al-Shamahi tells us about her evolution from creationist to evolutionary biologist.
My whole worldview, it wasn't going to be changed overnight. It was bit by bit by bit.
Next time on Here and Now.
Join us tomorrow afternoon from 1 to 3 on WUSF 89.7.
I'm Nancy Guan, a reporter at WUSF. Like you, I'm busy, and I need help staying on top of what's going on. I depend on the Wake Up Call, the daily newsletter from WUSF. It starts your weekdays with a quick early glance at the important news happening in the Tampa Bay region and the world. You get quality reporting from WUSF and NPR journalists, and connections to local artists, events, and more. Sign up is easy. Just visit WUSF.org.
Welcome back to Florida Matters Live and Local. I'm Matthew Petty. Well, if you like art galleries, sometimes the building is just as spectacular as the art hanging on the walls. A couple of weeks ago on Florida Matters Live and Local, we talked about St. Petersburg's Dali Museum. It's an architectural statement just as bold as Dali's surrealist paintings. Well, best-selling historical novelist Fiona Davis finds inspiration for her books in New York City landmarks. Her latest book, The Stolen Queen, is set at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Here's a little snippet.
Out in the galleries, Charlotte paused in front of one of her favorite depictions of Hathor in the collection, a fragment of a statue known as the Cerulean Queen. It had been found at the turn of the 20th century by a British earl who fancied himself something of an Egyptologist, in a trash heap containing destroyed statues of Hathor just outside her temple. Nearby had lain a broken slab of limestone with a warning that translated to, "Anyone who removes an object dear to Hathor outside of the boundaries of the kingdom will face the wrath of the gods."
Well, Davis will be at the Sarasota County Library's Off the Page Literary Festival later this month, and she's with us now. Thank you so much for joining us, Fiona. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so The Stolen Queen hops around from Manhattan to Cairo and back again. It features the Met and a stolen artifact, and as I was kind of reading through some of it, I was thinking this is a pretty timely subject, right? And I'm wondering, what were you thinking when you heard last month about the jewel heist from the Louvre?
Oh my goodness, it's incredible, the fascination with museums and stolen art. And it goes way back, and a lot of what my book deals with is art that is, ended up in a museum possibly because it was looted, because it was stolen. And what do you do with art like that that's now in museums like the Met or the British Museum? Mm-hmm. Where does it belong? Does it belong in its home country? Does it belong to humanity? And those are some of the questions I tried to delve into as I wrote it.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a reckoning that a lot of big museums, as you point out, have had to deal with lately, and some have done it fairly successfully, others maybe not so much. Did you spend a lot of time sort of wandering around the Met when you were a student in New York City?
I've always spent a lot of time there. I love the museum. It's one of my favorites. But I have to say, I was very reluctant to write about it in a book because it's enormous. I
Yeah.
think there's 18 or 19 different departments. It's just huge. And it took me a while to figure out my way in.
Mm-hmm. So is this a book that had been sort of marinating for a little while, like because you kind of draw inspiration from New York City, right? And there's just an endless supply of historic places, and I'm sure places that maybe people aren't thinking about that you think this could be a great place to set my novel. But is this something that was on the back burner for some time?
It was. So many people, so many readers had reached out to me and said, how about the Met? Let's do the Met Museum. And I joke around that by, the 20th book, I'll be doing the gas station on the corner of 11th Avenue.
I mean, that could be good. Gas stations are fascinating places.
Why not, right? There'll be one left. And, but, each building that I've looked at, it's so much fun to wander around the city and find a building and think, oh, I wonder what happened there. Because every building that I've looked at so far has had some kind of marvelous secret or history that was really fun to bring to life.
When did you arrive in New York?
I came to New York in 1988, right after graduating from college.
Wow. I mean, the city has changed quite a lot since then, right? It's sort of really gone through some kind of new iterations.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, these old tenement buildings are now replaced by these glass skyscrapers. But I always say that New York is a city of change. Even, some things you might like, some things you don't. And I found with every New Yorker, the city is kind of set in amber the year that they arrived.
Mm-hmm.
And then from then on, everything is compared to that. Oh, I remember when there was a donut shop there. I remember this. And that's your your baseline for how New York should be. And any change is just, we can't stand it. But that's just New Yorkers being New Yorkers.
Yeah. Do you consider yourself a New Yorker, or is it something that do you still feel like a bit of an outsider sometimes?
Well, that's such a good question. My past is so confusing. I was born in Canada, but raised in New Jersey and Utah. My parents moved to Texas at one point. I went to college in Virginia. And so I've never quite known where I belong. And I would come up to New York during summers at college, and I just fell in love with the place. And this was New York in the late 80s, which was a tough place to live. And I loved it. And so, yeah, I do feel like a New Yorker after all that time. I think I've earned the right.
You've earned it, yeah. If you're just joining us on Florida Matters Live and Local, we're talking with best-selling historical novelist Fiona Davis. Her latest book is The Stolen Queen. It's set at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in Cairo and other places. So, Fiona, you came to New York to study to be an actor, I think. Is that how it started? And then
That's right, yes.
How did you go from that to what you do now, which is writing fiction?
Yeah, it's a funny story. I came to New York to go to acting school, and I did that. And I worked as an actress for about 10 years doing Broadway and off-Broadway and off-Broadway, and had a marvelous time. It was just fantastic. But as I kind of aged out of being an ingenue, I started looking around and thinking, well, maybe there's something else I want to do. And it's tricky with acting because you have no power. You're told where you will be the next week or the week after, and you have no idea what might happen. That, you could get a job and suddenly you're off to Arizona to do regional theater. Who knew? Mm-hmm. And so I wanted something with a little more control. And I went and I took a Myers-Briggs test, which is those, psychological profiles that tell you what career you met with. And I did that. And I went back to get the results, and the consultant sat down with me and they said, well, it says that you should either be a journalist or a cop.
Huh.
And it was pretty obvious I shouldn't be a cop.
So did you consider being a police officer, though? Is that something that kind of crossed your mind?
Way. No way. What both have in common, I realized later, was an idea of fairness.
And you've got to be inquisitive and sort of be prepared to not get put off if people tell you no, too, I think.
Yes, exactly. And so I applied to Columbia Journalism School at that point, and luckily got in and had a marvelous time at their master's program, and then came out to be a journalist. And then another 10 years went by, and suddenly I had a great idea for a book that came out of a possible article. And I wrote that book, and then suddenly was on this whole other turn. So I always suggest that you change your career every 10 years because you eventually end up where you should be.
Wow. Okay, so was it hard to make that jump from journalism to being a novelist?
Yeah, it was. I was very lucky, I think, where I didn't know anything. and so I lucked into a wonderful position where I wrote this book that was based at the Barbizon Hotel for Women, which was now a condo. And I thought, oh, what a great idea for a dual timeline novel where you'll have a 1950s woman going there as this, marvelous hotel for young women who were like Joan Didion and Grace Kelly stayed there. And then I'll jump to modern times where a journalist starts looking into some kind of mystery, because I love a mystery. So I always try and make my books a page turner. And so I wrote that book and went to a couple conferences about writing, because fiction writing is very different from journalism. It's a whole other industry. And I met an agent who was interested, and luckily was able to sign with her. Wrote the book, we worked on the book, we sold the book, and I was off and running.
Wow. How much time, if any, have you spent in the Tampa Bay region? I'm wondering if there's any places you've looked at and thought, okay, that could be a good spot to set a novel.
Oh, the Tampa Bay, I have been there a few times for book events, and there's a wonderful bookstore there, which the name is...
Tombolo, maybe?
Which one?
Tombolo Books in St.
Yes,
Petersburg?
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And for me, a bookstore is always a great setting. I would love to set any kind of story in a bookstore or a library, that kind of thing. But I don't know the area well enough to really say. What's wonderful is whenever I go to visit, people come up to me as I'm signing books and say, how about this place? How about that place? So might as well have a binder full of buildings.
I bet you do. Now, speaking of bookstores, I read that you met your partner in a bookstore at a book signing, right? And he's an author as well, Greg Wands, I think. That kind of sounds like the plot of a rom-com. I mean, are there some other genres that you want to get into, like romantic comedy?
No, yeah, we did. We met in a bookstore, and we shared a publisher and a publicist, so we had that in common, and just hit it off right away. Yeah, he actually writes thrillers, and so we worked together on an audiobook that's a historical thriller, I guess you'd call it, a short piece, a novella called The Gimlet Slip, and it was really fun to work together because watching his mindset as a suspense author and using my background as a historical fiction author, it was really fun to jump into there. Yeah, I'd love to write a good cozy mystery. That'd be fun.
Yeah, and is it hard sort of co-writing? Because, I mean, writing is often such a solitary process, right? What's it like kind of trying to get into that headspace where you're collaborating rather than writing solo?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I love the solo aspect of writing. I love being in my office just working, researching, whatever. But it was a really fun time to work on the book together because we both had a little time off. And just to be able to brainstorm with someone else and not be locked in your own head and to bounce things off and have ideas and then, oh, what about that? And what if we did that? And what if we did that? It was really great. And luckily we're still together, so it worked out.
Mm-hmm. And do you write several books at a time? Like, have you got a couple of different things you're working on concurrently, or do you find you have to just focus on one thing, get it out the door, and then move on to the next?
I need to focus on one thing. I'm not good at juggling. And so often if I do try and do that, I'll be mixing up characters from book to book, which is not a good idea.
Yeah.
So yeah, I try to keep to one book at a time. And working on The Stolen Queen was a real joy.
And what are you working on now?
Yeah, so the next book is set at this museum. It's the oldest house in Manhattan called the Morris Jumel Mansion. No one has heard about it. It's this little gem of a museum. It's up on 160th Street, so it's a little further beyond the normal tourist areas. And it's this gorgeous house. And the incredible thing, it was owned by a woman in the 1800s named Eliza Jumel. She was born the daughter of a prostitute, but she became the richest woman in Manhattan because she was so good at real estate.
Wow.
And she was out, really tough and sharp. And it's been really fun to work on.
Looking forward to seeing that hit the bookshelves too. Fiona Davis's latest novel is The Stolen Queen. She'll be at the Sarasota County Library's Off the Page Literary Festival on November 20th. Thank you so much, Fiona. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Well, next time on Florida Matters Live and Local, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are 50. They've won a couple of Super Bowls, but are you a Bucs fan from way back when they couldn't win a game? We want to hear from all of you. Share your stories about the Bucs. Call 813-755-6562 and leave us a message, and tune in tomorrow at 12 noon on WUSF. That's our show for today. Florida Matters executive producer is Grayson Doctor. Our producer is Emily Horace. Lily Belcher is our intern. Our engineers are Jackson Harp and Gio Garvin. And Warren Buckholtz handles the video. I'm Matthew Petty. Thanks so much for watching and listening, and we'll see you tomorrow.
At WUSF, support comes from the people who listen, like you. Also, Tampa Bay Solar, on a mission to free you from high energy costs by reducing reliance on power companies and setting you on a path of independence. Navy SEAL owned. Details at tampabaysolar.com.